Hi, I'm Mark. This is Mark's Tech Vlogs on YouTube, and today we're going to be reviewing the Aqara G3 camera hub. Now this is a £99 HomeKit secure video compatible smart camera to use in your home. But it packs in much more than just being a camera, including the ability to be a Zigbee hub, a hub for Aqara devices, and an infrared relay. Now this is going to be a pretty long review because of all of its features, and I want to cover as much as I can, although I know I'm going to miss stuff out. So buckle up and let's dive into this awesome camera from Aqara. And let's start off by talking about the design. Now this camera has a modern looking design and it's pretty much all white apart from the front. It even comes with a little silicone cover which gives it ears if you want it to look cuter. This of course can come off if you're not bothered by the cuteness. The bottom of the camera has a base, and then the camera itself kind of rotates on this bottom, which gives it a 360-degree angle. Likewise, the front, you've got the lenses and things like the night vision sensors and the movement sensors, but then also that can close for a privacy mode. So let's talk about spec. So firstly, this is a 2K camera, which is great. It can also capture audio. It is worth saying that if you use it in Apple's HomeKit, it can only capture up to 1080p video. This is because of a limitation with Apple's secured video. This camera is capable of rotating and tracking movement, which means it can cover 360 degrees. It can also tilt vertically up to 45 degrees. That's 30 degrees up and 15 degrees down. It also has built-in AI recognition. That means it can detect movement and follow movement around, but also do things like recognising humans and faces, and also recognising and tracking animals. It is capable of connecting to your home Wi-Fi via 2.4 or 5 GHz networks. And then it has a load of other features as well. So as you guessed from the title, it can also act as a hub for your Aqara devices, but on top of that, your Zigbee devices as well. That means you can connect other Aqara things like motion sensors. And that Zigbee hub is a Zigbee 3.0 hub. And all in all, you can connect up to 128 devices to this hub. And then finally, it can also act as a remote control relay. That means you can control and program your infrared remotes with this device. And you can even turn them into Siri shortcuts or add them as scenes into your Apple Home app. And then in terms of compatibility, it's compatible with a lot of different platforms. But as you've guessed, it's largely geared towards Apple users because of that HomeKit secure video compatibility. That means this camera appears in your Apple Home app. On top of that, however, it is Matter compatible. It works with Alexa, Google, iFTTT, and a few other services. It is worth noting that only the camera is exposed to these other devices. And then it also has a privacy mode built in. This is where the camera is hidden, and this is done by kind of rolling down and you see a couple of eyes to make it look like it's asleep. It's also on this close screen you have a slot for a micro SD card, and it can take a card up to 128 gigabytes. This is great for storing that video locally as well as in the cloud. And then finally, it is powered by a USB-C cable, and it comes with a power adapter and that cable in the box. As you can tell from the spec, this camera really does pack a lot in. And that means I'm going to struggle to cover absolutely everything in this video, but I'm going to share the things I think are important and my experience of using it. So let's briefly talk about setup. So setup is pretty easy, and you do need the Aqara app for it. It's also during this setup process that you will also add it to the Apple Home app. And of course, if you used other platforms, you'd also add it to those at this point as well. But as I say on this channel, I'm an Apple user. I pretty much use Siri stuff and Apple stuff all around my house, so that's all I'm going to cover. Once you've done that, you can view the video feed in the Aqara app, but also in the Apple Home app. That applies to your phone or your watch or your computer. So let's talk about what this camera is like to use. And I'm going to break this down into two parts. I'm going to talk about using it with the Apple Home app, and I'm going to talk about using it with the Aqara app, because both offer different features. And really, I think you're probably going to end up using it with both. So firstly, because the camera has tracking built in, the Apple Home app, when you use it with it, is pretty much a kind of overview. So you can't actually control the camera and move it around in the Apple Home app, but you can see the current angle and view. That means if the camera has moved because it's detected something, you will see the current angle in the Apple Home app. Equally, in the Home app, you can toggle some notifications. So you can decide whether you want it to track different types of movement and if you want notifications for it as well. So it can track humans with facial recognition, it can track animals, packages, and vehicles. Although I'm hoping for an indoor camera, it never tracks a vehicle. You can also set recording settings in the Apple Home app, so whether it streams when you're at home and records when you're away from home, or records all the time. And then you can also scrub back through video captured via the Apple Home app. And having the camera in HomeKit, in my opinion, is great because it puts it alongside your other cameras and all your other smart home devices, and I love having everything in one place. Of course, it also means you can tie it into other automations and things as well. It also exposes a security hub via the camera as well to HomeKit, although I'm not really sure the point of this at the moment. The HomeKit integration is pretty seamless and loads really quickly. And then secondly, for more advanced features and diving into settings, you're going to be using the Aqara app. In the Aqara app, as you'd expect, you can click into the camera to view a live feed. From here, you can also easily toggle it into privacy mode, you can take a photo, you can record some footage, and you can also use the controls to move the camera around. And then of course here, you can also use the two-way audio. The infrared button, which is also here, lets you control and add infrared remotes. And I'll talk more about that later on. But let's go through some of the other tabs on the bottom. So firstly, the Advanced tab. So this is where you can toggle on a few other things easily. So you can toggle on human or pet detection here. You can set up an intelligent cruise mode, you can turn on face detection, you can turn on gesture identification, and you can go through to more settings if you want to as well. It's worth saying that in this mode you can't have both pet and human detection on, although you can toggle both on in the other settings. You get to these other settings by going into more. And it's here you can do things like name your camera, you can format memory cards, you can look at albums, you can set up matter, you can connect to HomeKit, and you can go deeper into the detection settings. That means you can turn on things like abnormal sound detection. And with each of those detection settings you can toggle on, you can choose if you want notifications and if you want it to record. And then finally you have that service tab. And this is where you can set up a subscription. Now, I don't think Apple users are going to need it if you're already using your Apple iCloud account, but if you do want a subscription, it works out at $50 for a year, or $5 a month. This gives you 30 days of cloud backup of the video. But like I said, for Apple users and people using a memory card as well, I don't think you're going to need that. The other thing I want to mention about the Aqara app is scenes and automations. So automations is where you can set up different behaviours for the camera based on actions of other things. Now this isn't something I've been able to test much because I don't have other Aqara devices I can tap into with this. But if you had something like a motion sensor, you could say when it detects motion, move the camera around or something. Likewise, if you had Aqara lights, you could say when the camera detects motion, turn on a light. Scenes, however, is where you can create kind of pre-programmed settings. And obviously you can set up scenes and automations in the Apple Home app as well. And for the most part, I think doing this in the Apple Home app is much more useful because you've got access to all of your other smart home devices that can interact with this. There is, however, one reason you might create scenes in the Aqara app, and that is because you can export scenes into the Apple Home app. And this means you can add things into the Apple Home app that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So one thing I wanted to do, which you can't natively do out of the box, is switch on privacy mode when the first person arrives home and switch it off when the last person leaves. That's because if someone's at home, I don't actually want it to be recording what's going on. I only really want to be recording stuff when I'm away from home. That means I can keep an eye on what's going on and track the cat when I'm away. And natively you can't achieve this via geolocation features in the Apple Home app because you can't control with privacy mode, and you can't do it in the Aqara app either. But there is a way around it, and I've made a whole video on how to do that. But essentially you can create a scene that turns on privacy mode and a scene that turns off privacy mode. One of the really cool things is you can then export these scenes into the Apple Home app, which means you can then tie it into when the first person arrives home and when the last person leaves automations. This is a great way of getting that privacy mode into the Apple Home app. This also means anything you can create a scene with in the Aqara app can be exposed to the Apple Home app, which is fantastic. Likewise, you can also export any of these scenes as a Siri shortcut. This is great if you want to toggle things with your voice as well. And again, privacy mode is a great example because you can ask for privacy mode to be switched on with your voice. So let's talk more about the camera quality, the movement tracking and the speed. So firstly, I found that whether I use the Aqara app or the Apple Home app, the camera feed loads really quickly. Of course, this does depend when you're away from home on the speed of your mobile internet, but generally I found it loads pretty quickly. Secondly, the quality in both day and night mode is super impressive, and the movement detection works really well. Even if a cat is charging all over the place, it still picks it up. And then the audio is pretty good too for hearing what's going on. And of course, in both the Aqara and Apple apps, you can scrub through the history and download video if you want to. Now personally, I prefer the Apple way of doing this, but the Aqara interface for this works well as well. The other thing I found is that notifications for movement do come through really quickly as well. Personally, I prefer the Apple ones because you get a little thumbnail. In fact, the only notifications I now have toggled on for the Aqara app is the unusual noise ones. And in terms of the G3 camera and its camera ability, it's really difficult to fault it. It's just absolutely fantastic. And like I said earlier, it's worth noting that it does also expose a security system to Apple's Home app. This can have home, away and night modes, but I haven't really found much use for this yet. I also haven't found a way to see the status of this in the Aqara app. And then we should talk about the two other features of this camera. So the ability for it to be a hub for Zigbee or Aqara products is fantastic. And this is especially true for minimising the amount of hubs you have around your house. Now, as I don't have any of the Aqara devices that rely on a hub and I don't use Zigbee devices, this isn't something I'd be able to test, but it is certainly something worth mentioning. The other feature is the IR Blaster and Mimicker. This is something I've been able to test, and this allows you to basically clone any infrared remote to the device. This means you can then control whatever remote control that is via the Aqara app. And of course, you can then create a scene, which you can then add into Apple Home. And generally setting up remotes is super easy. And this is especially true if you've got a common device. For example, I have a Samsung TV, and adding it was just a case of saying I've got a Samsung TV, and then it asked me to press different buttons to see if the power worked, and it automatically knew all of the buttons based on the signal that worked. You can, however, program something unbranded completely from scratch if you want to. So I've got a set of speakers that hasn't got a recognised brand, and I could just program every button individually. This is done by following the on-screen instructions and pressing the remote in front of the camera. And then, as I said, you can then bind any button into a scene, and that includes combinations of buttons with delays between presses. So maybe you want one that sends a signal to turn the TV on, waits a few seconds, and then presses another button. And you can then expose this scene into Apple Home or to Siri shortcuts. And this infrared stuff is really clever, and of course has to be in range of your device, but for me it works well every time. And actually it works just as well as other systems I've tried like the SwitchBot Hub 2, but with the big advantage that any scene can go to Apple Home. Which means in that scene in Apple Home you could also add things like setting your lights and have like a full-on TV on lighting mode setup. So all in all, what's the verdict on the Aqara G3 camera hub? And this camera, from the length of a review as you can tell, is absolutely packed with features. And I feel like I've only just scratched the surface of what this camera can do in this review because it is so capable of so many things. What I will say, however, is that this is easily the best indoor camera that I've used. And I think it's probably the best choice for Apple users for a whole variety of reasons. Firstly, if you've already got your iCloud account, you don't need any kind of payment plan. You can just utilise your iCloud storage. If you don't have much of that, you can even just utilise the built-in memory card and still access a video when you're away. Secondly, the quality, including the night mode, is absolutely fantastic. And that motion tracking is really, really good. And then thirdly, those infrared relay and hub features are really nice to have, especially that you can expose any button as a scene to the Apple Home app or to Siri. And it's this that creates kind of infinite possibilities with the Aqara app and enhances the Apple Home app. The only downside I'd say is that I feel like the Aqara app does take a bit of getting used to. And for your day-to-day settings, it's really easy to use, but when it comes to diving deeper, I still find it a little bit tricky to find where those menus are hidden. And this is especially true for changing the advanced motion settings, but also exporting the scenes to HomeKit. And actually this took me forever to find, which is why I have made a tutorial video on how to do it. And that being said, I don't know how they could make it better, because actually there's just a lot of features you can play with, and it's great that they give you so many options. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you've got any questions, do stick them below and I will answer those for you. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like because that does help this channel out. If you do want to pick one up, I have put a link below. That's an Amazon affiliate link, so that will help out this channel if you make a purchase using that link. This isn't a channel I do as a paid job, this is something I do for fun, so I hope it helps you guys make a purchase decision, and if you use that link, thank you very much. It's also worth saying that link will take you to the camera in whichever country you're in. Please subscribe to my channel to see new videos when they come out, and I will see you guys again soon.